listening to the Cross-Check NHL Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clarke.
Hello and welcome to the Cross-Check NHL Show. Thanks for making the Cross-Check NHL Show your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. We're free and available on all platforms, now including YouTube. My name is Mary Clarke, staff writer for The Win, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mary C. Clarke. I'm here with Andrew Berkshire, NHL analyst for the Montreal Gazette and host of Game Over Montreal on the SDPN, who you can follow on Twitter at Andrew Berkshire. On this Tuesday edition of the Cross-Check, I'm back from vacation. As for hockey news, there's a lot to talk about. Carey Price has made his long-awaited return to the ice and spoke about his last year dealing with mental health issues. In more goaltending news, both the Penguins and Hurricanes are dealing with some tough injuries to their starting netminders. And finally, are the Kings going to blow this as the Golden Knights are breathing down their necks? So, Andrew, before we start off today's show, how you doing? It's been a while.
Oh, God, I am so tired, Mary. The term long weekend doesn't go far enough to describe a long weekend with two small children. 4-day weekend up here in Canada for Easter.
Mm-hmm.
Both were sick.
Aw.
My wife was sick.
Oh, no.
I had to work 3 of the 4 days.
Andrew, it sounds like you need a vacation, too.
I am very excited for the end of the regular season and not really having to worry too much about the Montreal Canadiens anymore.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. But I'm sorry you had a rough weekend, because I didn't know Canada gets 4 days off for Easter. That's cool.
Yeah, we do nice. Easter on Monday.
Ah, okay, interesting. Any reason why, or just because?
I don't remember. I don't know why.
Just little interesting tidbits that I've learned throughout this podcast of the differences between United States and Canada.
I guess it's like, because wasn't it 3 days in the whole
Andrew,
Christian
you're asking
thing?
somebody who hasn't gone to church in a very long time.
Yeah, I haven't gone to church since I was in high school, where it was mandatory to attend Mass going to a Catholic school.
You went to a Catholic school. Much like my dad, he went to a Catholic school. But as you can see, I'm back. I am back from vacation. Had a good time. I won't regale you with the stories. Just I went to Disneyland and San Diego to visit family. San Diego to visit, like I said, visit family. My cousin, her husband, and 2 kids live there, so we haven't seen them in a while. So we went there, and it was a lot of fun. And also, of course, Disneyland was great too, because it's just like a couple hours away from San Diego, so it was a good time. And I may not have looked at hockey a lot over the past week, but this is going to be a learning experience for us together. But I put together this doc today, so I think we're back in the swing of things officially. And one of the biggest things I wanted to start with, because we've talked about it before, and also, of course, we have a Montreal Canadiens expert on this podcast, is that Carey Price has returned to play. He played his first game since July 2021. So that was, Stanley Cup final. If, we all remember that the Stanley Cup final got pushed to July on Friday against the Islanders. The Canadiens lost 3-0, but he made 17 saves. And Andrew, you basically had like a front row seat to this, as being a Montreal Canadiens person. What was it like? Because I obviously missed this because I was still on vacation, but what was, the reaction like, the reception like? How did it feel to have him back?
I mean, the crowd felt like the Bell Center crowd for the first time in a long time. Price got a very, very long, very loud ovation, both for like warm-up and for the starting lineup and throughout the game. At one point, I think he had like 1 save, because frankly, the Montreal Canadiens massively outplayed the Islanders in that game. And it just so happened that they made 1 major mistake, and it was a 3-on-0 breakaway. And of course, there's not really much you can do to stop a 3-on-0 breakaway if it's executed well. So Price let in that goal, and then Noah Dobson had like a perfect shot shortly after that, and an empty netter. But the Canadiens couldn't find the net, and it was like 3 or 4 minutes, maybe even longer into the game. The Islanders had 1 shot, and it was just like a little trickler from the boards, and the fans were like going crazy, like Carey, as if it was like this 10-bell save. And he made a couple good saves in the game, and he looked great, but it was interesting to see for a goaltender who's had like major ups and downs in this market from being booed in his second year to, almost being kicked out of town or almost run out of town by fans and media. The love is very apparent right now. And part of that's got to be from last year's playoffs, right? Because he was so incredible, but also what he's gone through and people recognizing the hurdles that he's gone through to get back. And the fact that, watching him in warm up, Price is a very stoic person, right? He doesn't show a lot of emotion on his sleeve. There's very few moments that I can think of where you can see what he's feeling. There are times where he's gotten angry in games. There are times like when he won the Olympic gold medal in I think Vancouver. No, sorry, Sochi. And he was there with his dad, and the two of them just kind of glassy-eyed tears, just gave each other like a head-to-head hug kind of thing. And like that's kind of Price showing emotion, right? But in this warm-up, he was trying very hard to just have like no expression, but you could see the corners of his mouth curl up. He was grinning. He was so excited to be back in that net. And I'm just so happy for him because like 75 games to sit on the sidelines for somebody who his whole career has rushed back from injury too early, has pushed himself to play in almost every single possible game. Through his prime, Carey Price, for the games that he was not actively on the injured list, played a higher percentage of his team's games than anybody else in the league by like a significant margin. So to see him sit out for so long and finally get back in it, it has to feel good. We don't know what his trajectory is for how many games he's going to start the rest of the way, but it seems like he has a plan, and it's all going to depend on conditioning and how he feels game to game. But it was an awesome feeling, frankly. Despite the fact that Canadians couldn't get it done and couldn't win, I mean, it was just really cool to see him back in there for a lot of people who felt like he wasn't going to ever come back.
Yeah. You mentioned how beloved he is, and it seems like it didn't start that way. Obviously, I haven't followed like his career, completely, as somebody who wasn't really a big hockey fan until I guess more recently, and didn't really work in hockey until even more recently than that. So like, I haven't followed his career, but if you, as you say, it's been up and down. But yes, it's great to see the positive reaction, especially because Montreal's had such a tough year overall. Like, you find these little wins where you can, even though the team didn't win, you find these little, I want to say moral victories, but like, feel good moments, feel good stories. And you've had a couple of them recently, with, the team overall playing better. The future of the franchise seems to be really bright. And now Carey Price, at least for a little while, is returning to the ice. And that's, really something special, especially if you have a goaltender who's, been in your city for so long. As a Flyers fan, I don't really understand that because that doesn't really happen with this city. So like, it's really awesome to see, and obviously we're really happy for him. And he also spoke to the media, and opened up a bit about the hardships he's faced, because he's made it no secret that mental health has been a big thing for him. And it was especially tough this year, Andrew, because he sat out, coming after a Stanley Cup final loss. And usually that's a pretty big motivating factor for people, in order to get back out there and, continue playing. But, he's had to sit around and think about that loss. But here's, just some of the quotes he had, and this is coming from Sportsnet. So there's definitely been a lot of time for self-reflection on a personal level and as a professional. I would say it's really been definitely a trying time. It's been positive at the end of the day because I've been able to handle those experiences and came out on top of them. He also, mentioned how like he's still thinking about the that Stanley Cup final loss. And he said, I think that's something that even today it's still kind of hard to comprehend, coming so close. I think that any team that has ever gotten to that point will say that it's probably taken years to get over that unless you get the opportunity right away. And not having had that opportunity for, 14 years, then getting it and getting so close and yet being so far away, it's something that I'm still getting over. It definitely feels like a lost chance still. I understand, the lost chances, the, feel like you'll never get back to where you were, type of thing. Especially, I mean, I can't relate to it in a sports sense, but I can relate to it in a career sense. I've been
Yeah.
there in my career before with losing job opportunities, and whatnot. So I can at least emphasize with that. But like I said, it must have been tough to lose the Stanley Cup final in such an emotional way, after such like I said, an incredibly emotional run for the Canadians. That was really something special last year. And then, not being able to get out on the ice again and just having it stew in your mind. So hopefully now, like, sure, it'll be in the back of his mind probably for a while, as all losses and stuff like that is. But now that he's playing again, even at least for a handful of games, because the end of the season is right around the corner, at least he can start to take, steps forward. And it seems overall he's in a better place mentally. He's been more open and honest and talking to the media. And it's just been really good to see, Andrew.
It has, and I feel like losing out on that opportunity hits especially hard when you're in the back part of your career, right? And you've seen now 3 seasons in a row going into this one where you weren't playing that great in the regular season, right? And
Mhm.
when the playoffs came around and he was fortunate enough to play in them the last 2 years, despite the Canadiens not actually being that good in the regular season, he did turn it on and was
Mhm.
incredible. But overall, it's been a rock go for Carey Price over the last several years, and then having injuries, your career in jeopardy. Of course, it's going to feel like that last one is like even worse, right? You don't know. He was very clear throughout the season, whenever he did have a media availability, that he wasn't sure if he was ever going to play again. That he was going to try his very hardest, but he wasn't sure just because the knee injury kept on bugging him whenever he was getting close. So it's a really cathartic situation for Carey Price right now. The interest is going to be, what can he do next year, right? Even if he only plays a couple more games, what can he do next year?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I was actually going to bring up his future because he talks about it in this Sportsnet article that, he basically said he wants to finish playing at an acceptable level. And now I'm quoting him here. I don't know how long that is, but at the end of the day, I want to be able to say that I left the game playing well and not being a burden. And he also talked about possibly representing Canada next month's IIHF Men's World Championship. I said it's hard to make that call right now, but that's really fascinating, like a, quote to me, that he wants to, go out at the end of the day. Like he wants to finish playing at a level he wants to play at. Like he doesn't want to extend his career so long that he's kind of a shell of himself, basically. And I feel like a lot of athletes probably think that way. And I believe Carey Price is 34.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's at least still a bit of time for him. The aging curve has not caught up with him completely yet. Like there's still, you can still, play a few more years in his career if he wants to. But it's one of those things, as if, he's not feeling like himself in terms of, like, I don't know. Like I said, if he feels like a shell of himself, he would probably retire. But I would hope that this ends of the season is, like I said, a step forward for him, and he can get through maybe a couple more seasons, even with this Canadiens rebuild. Um, just the overwhelming positive force, and positivity, like, just around the team that he's brought, could even carry into next year. And I think that means
Carry
something.
into nice,
Yes,
Mary.
yes. Thank you. That was a very unintentional pun. But yeah, it's just been great to see him. Do you have any more thoughts, Andrew? As somebody who's watched his career really closely for a very long time, covering the Canadiens. Any last thoughts on this before we move on?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who believe that if Carey Price plays well down the stretch here and gets into, say, 4 out of the last 6 games, that he's going to essentially ask for a trade in the offseason, and the Canadiens will have to facilitate him just out of, loyalty. I don't know if that's likely, just because his family's so settled here.
Yeah.
And there's something about Carey Price that it's that very hockey thing, right? Is that idea of unfinished business.
Hmm.
And I don't know if he wants to go to another team. Like, I know that people read into making himself available for Seattle last year as like, oh, he does want out. But like, That's a pretty unique situation. First of all, his family, like his wife's family, is from that area.
Yeah.
Second of all, he knew very well that there was very little chance that he was going to make a big impact this season. His contract is very onerous. The idea was that he was not going to get picked. Like,
Yeah.
it was his idea. It was a gambit, right? So I don't think he wanted to move. I think he knew that the risk was there, but very unlikely, especially with being injured and possibly needing 2 surgeries. So gamble paid off there. I think he's going to be there. I think the other thing is that salary cap situation that he would take up. The teams that can afford him aren't going to be competing for a Stanley Cup. So, like, Carey Price wants a Stanley Cup desperately. His best chance might not be with Montreal, but it's a better chance than going to, say, Seattle.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we'll see. Like, I once thought Claude Giroux was going to be a Flyer forever. Doesn't always work out that way. But, I hope for Carey Price's sake, that he continues, his mental health continues to get better, all that stuff. And that he enjoys his time in Montreal, enjoys his time being the goalie there, for however long it is. And, good for Canadiens fans for giving him a warm welcome. Like I said at the start of this segment, it's good that they have, like, you guys have some nice heartwarming moments in this season full of not a lot of very heartwarming moments. So
Yeah, the first half had 0.
yeah, so, yeah. So I'm glad, we've talked about it. The future looks bright. Things, seem to be looking up for Montreal, and Carey Price hopefully is going to be at the heart of that for at least a little bit longer. But coming up next, we're going to continue the goalie talk, and we're going to talk about some 2 unfortunate injuries that have happened to the Penguins and the Hurricanes with their starting netminders, and that'll be coming up right after this. BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league news, and reviews, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. It means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection on every pair. It will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happened. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays. Exclusively for our listeners, head to shadyrays.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to get 50% off of 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. I actually bought a pair of these sunglasses and brought them to California when I was there. And hey, they actually, worked really well. It's great to add a new pair of sunglasses to my rotation because I always, either seem to lose them or break them. And it's great to know that they have a protection policy on them too. So make sure you use code Locked On for their best deal of the season, 50% off of 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses, backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. All right, Andrew. So like I was saying before we went to break, the Penguins and Hurricanes are kind of dealing with a bit of an unfortunate situation you don't want to see right before the playoffs start. They have both of these teams, the Penguins and the Hurricanes, now have injuries to both of their starting goaltenders. So I believe Tristan Jarry was first, or at least from what I remember seeing. I don't remember how it happened, but according to the Penguins, he's out week to week due to a lower body injury. And as we've talked about, the playoffs are basically a couple weeks away. So that's not good. And then, of course, I think a couple days later or like a day later, Frederik Andersen also was injured and is now out also with a lower body injury. I believe he had an MRI that was negative, and the Hurricanes said they will update next week, but that is still concerning. And there's, talks that he's probably out in the range of week to week. So, that is not great for either of these teams. Do you have any thoughts on this news, Andrew? Because those are 2 teams that could make a splash in the Eastern Conference, and it's a pretty stacked Eastern Conference. So what are you thinking about this news?
I find I'm less worried about Carolina just from watching them play this year. I know that they're still a very strong team, and I know he hasn't had a very good year, but like Antti Ranta's good.
Mhm.
Like I would not be worried about Carolina heading into the playoffs with Antti Ranta. Like
Yeah.
he's been beset by injuries over his career, which has kind of limited him. But for the most part, he's been a far, far above average goaltender. The Penguins, I'd be worried about,
Yeah.
especially facing a team like the Rangers, who are going to be rolling out Igor Shesterkin. Like,
You're gonna lose the goalie battle 10 times out of 10 because I think
yeah,
it's Casey DeSmith on the other end,
yeah,
of that.
and
So,
like he's okay, but not
yeah,
great.
and yeah, and you basically took my thoughts exactly. Carolina, it's hard to worry about them in the goaltending department because their defense is so good. And they turn, goaltenders you wouldn't think of being very good into very good goaltenders because of their system. I think you mentioned how you thought, Frederik Andersen's numbers that were
Was the system
inflated.
goalie? Yeah,
Yeah, but he's a system goalie. I mean, he's a good goalie on his own. We've seen it, in Toronto, even though he's had his ups and downs. But he's definitely benefiting from the system he is in. And like I said, I'm not as worried about them, but the Penguins are a different story because
yeah, they've been
Tristan.
struggling lately.
Yeah, they've been
Like,
struggling lately, and Tristan Jarry was basically the reason last year that the team didn't advance in the playoffs because he couldn't stop anything. Not to say that this injury will be, his fault if the Penguins don't win. I'm just saying that last year the Penguins
it could
also
be.
had goalie problems in the playoffs.
It's Tristan
So
Jarry who's the cause both times, even if it's not his fault this time.
I wasn't saying that exactly. I'm just saying I'm basically making the connection that this is basically possibly 2 years in a row that the Penguins could have
Yeah.
goaltending problems be the reason they bow out of the playoffs. Obviously, we're basically pronouncing, or at least I'm pronouncing the Penguins dead too early, but I'm not going to do that because Sidney Crosby and all them always show up for the playoffs every time. But it is concerning if you're a Penguins fan, especially if this week to week thing isn't resolved by basically May 1st.
You know what I think is more concerning for them, honestly?
What?
Because I'm guessing that Jari, maybe he could play worst comes to worst, he could play in the last week of the season, but they'll hold him out to the playoffs just to make sure he's
Mhm.
healthy. My concern for the Penguins is without Jari, they're struggling so much right now that they're going to fall into Washington's spot because Washington's kind of been
Ooh.
hot lately. And then they go from facing New York Rangers, which is sure uphill battle, but the Rangers are exploitable, to the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, the Florida Panthers, who I believe have been on an absolute tear recently
Yeah,
with the best offense in the league. Oh, that's a nightmare scenario.
absolute nightmare
I
scenario.
don't.
Either if Jari's out or not completely healthy against the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I mean,
Ugh.
I think their matchups are not incredibly favorable depending on where you look, especially with the way they've been playing recently. I don't know how many points they would need to drop to make that scenario happen because I'm not staring at the standings list. But the
Washington is 1 point behind with a game in hand.
okay, it's actually quite feasible.
It's
So that's
very close.
definitely something to watch out for, in the last couple weeks of the season. But, the Rangers have had the Penguins number all year long. And also they're gonna win the goalie battle 10 times out of 10 unless, either Casey DeSmith or Tristan Jarry, whomever is in net, completely stands on their head in a way that, outduels Igor Shesterkin. But, the Penguins are always gonna be on the back foot there. Um, I you've talked about how the Rangers are more of a paper tiger than, their offense actually suggests. But, the Penguins have had trouble scoring this season and, are kind of struggling, at least at the moment. So right now, it's not a favorable matchup. And of course, if you face Florida, that is just, you're running into an extreme gauntlet of, sure, you may be able to score goals on them if their goaltending situation isn't, because it's not as rock solid as New York's is, but they're going to outscore you basically 10 times out of 10 because their offense is just that good. So it's not really looking favorable for the Penguins, but I still find it hard to count them out because, they're the Penguins. They get things done when other teams usually don't. They have that, extra mentality. You've got your Mark Dunk syndrome. All that stuff factors into the Penguins. And it is, it's really hard to count them out until basically Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are gone, because they're the beating hearts of this team and they won't let this team go down without a fight. But yeah, it just makes for, at least this is making for an interesting Eastern playoff race when we know all the teams. Like we were talking before the show, we know all the teams now. Washington was locked into that last spot, or at least as the last team to lock in their spot in the East. And we know all the teams, but now it is the jockeying for position part. And that is definitely something I'm going to keep an eye out on, because I didn't realize it was that precarious with Pittsburgh. And, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Also, semi-related, since we're talking about the East, basically every single team that made the playoffs in the East is going to hit 100 points this year. That is absurd, Andrew.
It is.
That is completely absurd. And, I feel for, your Toronto Maple Leafs fans who are like, oh, yay, we hit over 100 points in the season. I think, what are they? Second in the Atlantic or whatever. That's usually cause to celebrate. And they have to play the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round.
Yep.
It's awful. The Eastern Conference is an absolute monster this year. And the Atlantic Division specifically is just awful.
The craziest thing is, even teams like the Rangers that looked like a paper tiger of goaltending and finishing ability, since the trade deadline, they're actually 5th in the league in expected goals for at even strength.
Wow.
So those two little trades that they made for Frank Vetrano and Andrew Kopp,
yeah,
they completely solidified their right wing position, which was a huge issue. Allowed them to bump Lafreniere down to the third line. He's now playing with Philip Hedl and Barclay Goodrow and playing well.
Mm-hmm.
Their fourth line has been doing well. Their defensive posture has gotten so much better. They're actually not that great offensively. They kind of still rely on finishing, but they've been much better defensively as Shesterkin fell off a little bit at the end of the year there.
Mm-hmm.
But now his numbers have solidified again because the Rangers themselves are now playing good defense. They have become a scary team as opposed to a paper tiger team. There's the only team in the East that's going to make the playoffs that I think is playoff fodder are the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the Capitals. And
even
we've kind of known that for a while, basically.
Yeah, and watching them play against the Montreal Canadiens this weekend, they won 8-4.
Mm-hmm.
They did not deserve to win that game.
Yeah,
they were garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Montembeault was terrible, and the refs handed it to them. Everything the Capitals did was fine. Tom Wilson was running around hitting people without the puck.
I saw that. Yeah,
he was doing Tom Wilson things, but I don't know. Can you really depend on the other goalie being unbelievably terrible and the refs carrying the play for you in the playoffs for 7 games? No.
Yeah, no.
I think the Washington Capitals are going to get blitzed in the playoffs no matter who they play. But they're red hot right now, I guess, in terms of wins and losses. So good for them.
Yeah, and I mean, it may make a more interesting, like I said, it may make a more interesting playoff race. But yeah, for a while, I think we've all thought that the Capitals are the weakest team. They're basically, a tier below everybody else. I mean, obviously you have teams like, your Floridas, and basically like your Carolinas kind of in the top tier. I mean, Florida may be in its own tier just because of its ridiculous offense, but you've got the teams in different tiers, and Washington is on the bottom of that tier list just based on, they feel like they're just kind of a holdout from their championship days. Not to say that this is a bad thing, but they're still a team in there. I guess you can say the Penguins are kind of like this too.
Yeah, they're the two oldest teams in the league.
Yeah, but because the Penguins have both Crosby and Malkin, it's hard, and it's kind of hard for me to really count them out. The Capitals have Ovechkin, but it just feels like, I don't know, their circumstances feel a little bit different. Maybe it's because the Capitals got their Stanley Cup more recently, and I know the Penguins won 2 back-to-backs also pretty recently, but the Capitals fans are probably like, hey, we're in the playoffs. We won our cup recently, though. It's kind of been like me with the Philadelphia Eagles. I was like, we won our Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Sure, I would like them to win, but I think they made the playoffs recently. I was like, cool, a playoff game. I don't care how it goes. You're kind of still riding that high, basically, of your championship, and you're like, I mean, just get Alex Ovechkin more time to just do his things, and bow out of the playoffs, even though you'll probably get blitzed and whatnot.
You know what it is though, Mary? It's watching tragic disappointment for so long
Mhm.
that when you finally win, like the Eagles, right?
Yeah.
Constant tragedy when it
Mhm.
comes to when they should win. Capitals, 2010 against the Canadiens, every other year
You're
until
against the
2018.
Penguins.
Like just always disappointment, heart-crushing, soul-crushing stuff. They finally win. Of course you're going to be happy because you
Yeah.
finally got through everything. It's the same with the Eagles. I feel like that's the
Yeah.
effect that we're seeing, and I do wonder if that kind of goes through with the players too, because you see the effort in the last few playoffs and
True. But
wasn't really there.
they're still gonna show up for the playoffs, and we could say all of this and they could somehow upset one of the top teams.
This is true.
I don't think it's gonna happen. It feels very unlikely, but I think we all thought that when the Columbus Blue Jackets faced the Tampa Bay Lightning. And look at what happened in that series. So the playoffs are the great equalizer, it feels like, in this game. But I know we talked a lot about the Penguins and their situation, but Carolina still looks good overall. I don't know who they'd be facing in the playoffs currently as it stands, but they probably still have
Boston.
Boston. That'll be a fun series. They probably are still favored even without Frederik Andersen, at least for game one, if that's the worst case scenario. If I had to guess. But Boston's no pushover either. I mean, their goalie situation has improved tremendously this year, and they're still tough out. And it's gonna be fun in the East. The chaos in the West, which we'll talk about in the next segment, is gonna be like, I feel like, at an all-time high because the teams are not nearly as good as the teams in the East. So it'll probably mean more upset potential, more just chaotic games overall. But the East is just gonna be a powerhouse. Just a bunch of titans facing one another, basically. It makes me really excited because even though the East is all but wrapped up in terms of like all the playoff teams are all wrapped up, but like there's still these little bit of movements that can happen, and thinking about the playoffs is just a lot of fun. But any more thoughts, Andrew, on this goaltending situation? Because it does suck to lose your starting goaltender on basically a week-to-week basis right before the playoffs start.
No. Let's go in on the LA Kings.
Ah, yes, my darlings, the LA Kings. I'm so sorry for jinxing you because this always happens to me. But we'll also talk more about the Vegas Golden Knights because they are the story in the West. And that will be coming up right after this. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. RockAuto.com is a family business, serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. The RockAuto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and choose the brands, specifications, and prices you prefer. Best of all, prices at RockAuto.com are always reliably low, and the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Why spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to RockAuto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. All right, locked on in there. How did you hear about us box so that they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, Andrew. So, like we mentioned before the break, are the Kings in danger of falling out of the playoffs? Because at least as of Monday when I made this doc, they are 4-5-1 in their last 10 games. Not a winning recipe, I will say that. And not only that, Vegas has been closing in on them slowly but surely over the past basically like week and a half. As of Monday when I made this doc, they're 3 points behind Vegas or LA after going 7-2-1 with a game in hand. That is a scary situation for the LA Kings. And we basically all thought that their playoff spot was assured because Vegas had such a hill to climb. We've talked about their struggles this year. But what's changed here, Andrew? You've probably seen, this play out a little bit more over the last week and a half while I was gone. So what has changed in this situation, Andrew?
Well, I'm not entirely sure where it's come from with Vegas, but it seems like it was kind of keyed by getting Dadonov after the
We
trade
did
deadline.
we did talk about that. We did. We mentioned that, and how he basically kicked off like right after the trade deadline and the whole trade fiasco with him. He had he put up a bunch of points, scored an OT winner. And yeah, it seems to have been, history ever since. I don't know, it feels like Vegas is kind of a chip on their shoulder. They don't want to lose. They've never missed the playoffs in their time as a franchise.
Well,
So
I think they also understand that they're up against it, right? Because
yes.
the Vegas Golden Knights can't miss the playoffs this year. If they miss the playoffs, it's a big, big deal. They're running $100 million salary this year. Like, it's crazy. And I know Mark Stone came off the injured reserve. That's a huge thing for them. Jack Eichel's playing again, playing well. But overall, I'm surprised that Vegas is allowed to get away with some of the shenanigans that they're allowed to get away with, because it was like, oh, Mark Stone's healthy. We have zero cap space. Oh, look at this. Surprisingly, $10 million of players are magically on LTIR now. And it's like, yeah, okay, here's the thing. Hockey players are always injured. There's always something. So
Mhm.
there's always something that you can point to and say, oh, well, this player has to sit out now long term. But come on. Come on. We all know this is bullshit.
I
Like,
mean, they did this with I guess is this worse than the Kucherov thing? Is it the same? I
I think it's
mean,
worse than the Kucherov thing, because the Kucherov thing was legit, right?
mhm,
You could see him last year in the playoffs that he was not 100%. I think the thing about that was there's a difference between healthy to play in the regular season and healthy to play in the playoffs.
mhm,
Would Patrice Bergeron have played in the Stanley Cup final with a rib that was broken and poking into his own
mhm,
lung, you know, in the
mhm.
Stanley Cup final? Would he have done that in the regular season? Hell
No.
no. But you push through it in the playoffs because players are insane.
Mhm,
So, yes, he was activated in the playoffs. It looks fishy, but in terms of the timeline of recovering from the surgery that he went through, it was completely legit. And to those saying that the Lightning planned it that way, I mean, you could say maybe, but nobody knew when that season was going to start,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There was so much uncertainty. My guess is they thought that they were going to wait until the start of the season and see what, like, how things would go. And then when things kept on dragging on and dragging on and dragging on, they elected to bring him in for surgery. After that, the league decides when the season's going to start, and he happens to go out the whole season. Did it break perfectly for Tampa Bay? Absolutely. But I really don't think that it was as sketchy as people wanted to believe. It was only
mhm,
like in the third round last year that Kucherov started playing well outside of the power play. Like,
mhm.
he was a power play killer, but he wasn't moving. It's just that they have Stamkos on the other side. They have Hedman. They have
Yeah, I mean,
Braden
that team
Point.
was stacked. That team
Yeah,
was incredibly stacked that they
that
were
power
able to
play.
also to get where they were without him in the regular season.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that power play through the first 3 rounds was at like 40%.
Mhm.
Like, it
Yeah.
was just absolutely lethal. It's the only reason they beat the Panthers,
Mhm,
right? Because the Panthers outplayed them significantly at even strength. So that, not fishy, but this Vegas situation,
mhm,
definitely fishy to me. I I think the way things have gone down and guys going on and off LTIR, and Stone was supposed to be out for the season and all of a sudden he's playing again, and the fact that they added major contracts like Jack Eichel during the season that they knew they couldn't afford,
mhm.
it's super sketch. And I think that's the other thing is people talked about how the Lightning added last year. The Lightning didn't add Kucherov level salary
No.
last year. Like, they added Blake Coleman. He
Mhm,
wasn't that highly paid.
mhm,
They added David Savard with massive salary retained. It's not like they didn't pay the price for those players. You know, they paid a hefty price.
mhm,
They paid first round picks for both, I think. So that is just a team loading up to me, but the whole long-term implications of Jack Eichel and the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights are up against it next year in the salary cap, they have very little room to maneuver. This is a do or die season, but they have now lost 2 in a row after their hot streak, and LA won their last game. So they're kind of getting back to
where it was
where they
before.
were before. And I know LA's had some serious injuries that they've been dealing with as well. Doughty is out for the season,
Yeah,
like
that's a
even in
big one.
playoffs. That's huge. I think they've got everyone else back though now.
Yeah. I mean, Drew Doughty is a huge blow. Been
Yeah.
on the team for a long time, a defensive leader. You can't replace that kind of, what he brings to the team and, what he does on the ice. So, I mean, if the Kings do make it, they were clearly going to be like a team that could make an upset in the first round, but it feels like they're, moving out of upset territory and it's just like, I don't know, not to say fodder for one of the, Western Conference's better teams, but it's a tough road ahead. They have a tough road if they want to upset, and it's always a tough road if you want to upset a team. But the Kings had potential, and now it's just a tougher road. I mean, I think we talked about like before I went away on vacation. If the Kings, by the time we, not the Kings, the Golden Knights, if we like talked about them next, like would they be in a playoff spot? Like what would happen at the start of May, basically, where would they be? Does this change anything to you in terms of like where you think they're gonna be? Because I mean, I believe I looked at Money Puck last night and they said their playoff odds were the Kings playoff odds were still at like 80% or above or somewhere around there. It was still really high. Even though there's been a lot of talk of Vegas coming on recently, they've got a game in hand and that's really important down the stretch. The games played starts to really, really matter now. For me, I don't think this changes anything. I think the Kings will stabilize enough that they'll be able to basically block out Vegas. But what do you think, Andrew? Does this change anything for you? Does Vegas, make that comeback and squeak into the playoffs, or was all their cap shenanigans for nothing?
I mean, it could be for nothing. It would be really unfortunate for Vegas, but I think a lot of people would be very satisfied. The thing is, though, the Golden Knights have been playing like really well since the deadline. They're at 55% expected goals for, which is 7th in the league, equal
Also,
to the Wild.
I mean, what's their schedules look like? I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, strength of schedule matters a lot. I haven't checked that, but I'm assuming that part of like on Money Puck, they take that into account. So that could be in favor of Los Angeles, but it's a tough situation, right?
Here,
I
keep
think
filling. I'm gonna look it
anytime,
up. I'm gonna look
yeah,
it up. Keep filling.
anytime a team is ahead of you in the standings, they have the power position. And the Kings, now that they're healthy, even without Drew Doughty, like they're a good team.
Mhm.
The gap between like the Golden Knights are playing better right now than the Kings are, no doubt about it. The Kings are also getting drastically unlucky. Like at even strength, the Kings right now are they're about a 52% expected goals for team, but they're getting 39% of the goals.
Mhm.
Like they're getting filled in the net. So their goaltending is really, really letting them down. Whereas Vegas is finally getting good goaltending. Like
Mhm.
Robin Lehner has been good. So that's a big deal. But how consistent would that be down the stretch? We just don't know.
Okay, so I've looked up their schedules, and it now seems that they're both the same amount of games played. But
Yes.
the Kings schedule, and they have what I believe 5 games left. They play the Ducks tonight on Tuesday, the Blackhawks, the Ducks again, the Kraken, and the Canucks. Meanwhile, the Golden Knights have the Capitals, the Sharks, the Stars, the Blackhawks, and the Blues. I think that's a clear schedule advantage to the Kings. I mean,
Yeah.
you're only facing one potential team in the playoff race in the Canucks, and they're basically out of it. I mean, they're basically playing no playoff teams. Meanwhile, the Golden Knights have the Capitals, the Blues. I believe the Stars are still in the playoffs, right?
Yes.
So thank you for confirming that, even though I definitely have the schedule up on another tab. But yeah, I mean, they've got to play. The Golden Knights have to play 3 playoff teams in that stretch, and it's gonna be tough competition. So you can at least give the schedule to LA. Sure, they can still fumble it because teams fumble it all the time, Andrew. But at least based on strength of schedule, that's probably why Money Puck has them at such high odds because their schedule is more favorable than Vegas is. But you never know. It's at least adding some more drama and intrigue to the rest of the season, and we'll probably continue to check in on this. Um, you know, because it is probably the most fascinating. Like, it's really the only major fascinating story of like the playoff races, as the last few weeks come to an end. But it's really interesting, and I hope the Kings don't blow it because I would feel very bad for having Sarah Avampado on the show and talking about the playoffs and whatnot, and completely messing it up for them and their team. So, all right, coming up next is our pop culture segment where we get to talk about stuff. I have a few things to talk about that I've collected over my vacation. I have no idea what Andrew's bringing to the table this week, but I've got some things to talk about, and that'll be coming up right after this. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you aren't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, so good. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, Puffs included. 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They are better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Try flavors such as mint brownie, coconut, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If you think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how, but they pull it off every time. So go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Andrew. So our pop culture segment. You don't have anything written down here, so I guess I will start because it's been a wild couple of weeks. I want to at least mention off the hop that while I was on vacation, Kingdom Hearts 4 got announced, which it's the 20th anniversary of the series overall, which makes me feel really, really old. That I've been a fan of the series for the majority of my life, and it's wild to see it grow alongside me as a person. So I've been a little bit emotional about that because if you're a fan of something from when you were young and it still continues on into your adult life, it's emotional. I don't know. But the Kingdom Hearts 4 got announced and it's wild. And there's speculation that there's a Star Wars world teased because there's an area that looks like, there's an area that looks like Endor with an ATST foot basically kind of in the background, or at least what looks like one of them. It has a very distinct shape, and the only thing people can think of it's an ATST foot. And I won't go into explaining why the Star Wars can actually happen now. But there is
Owned by Disney.
Yeah, well, yes, there's that, but it makes more sense in the lore. I don't want to have to explain Kingdom Hearts lore on this podcast, but it makes more sense in the lore for them to go to Star Wars now. I won't do it.
Yes.
It's too complicated, but I'm
If
very
anyone
excited
who
for that
isn't
game.
familiar with Kingdom Hearts wants to know how complicated it is, there's like videos on YouTube to explain the story before the third game, and they're like 2 hours long. It's so complicated.
I love the game so much. Don't get me wrong. It's basically my favorite series of all time. And in the moment, it's not that complicated, but when you've got 20 years of lore that builds on top of one another and adds wacky, complex ideas, it's going to be complicated. But if you're a Kingdom Hearts fan, or if you know gaming, you're probably kind of in the know about it. I'm excited to see this. I wasn't expecting to see Kingdom Hearts 4 announced this early. Basically, Kingdom Hearts 3 came out in 2019. So it hasn't been that long. I mean, we're probably not going to see this game for a few more years, but it's still exciting. It's always great to see things I love, continue on, and Kingdom Hearts is going to continue at least for a little bit longer. And hey, Star Wars might be a part of it. So I thought it was worthy to bring up here because, we've talked about Star Wars before. The other thing I want to talk about is the Thor, Love and Thunder trailer that came out on Monday. I thought that would be really, really good for us to talk about because Marvel stuff. We've got the new Doctor Strange movie coming out next month, right, in May. And then this comes out in July. And this is our first real look at the movie. And I'm really digging the aesthetic. And there's a lot to talk about here. So I'll let you take the floor, Andrew, because I'm sure you've seen the trailer by now.
Yeah, I'm just really excited. We got our first look at the mighty Thor, Jane Foster.
Yep.
With the banded together Mjolnir. I'm excited to see how they do her character. We didn't get to see any of the villain, Gore the God Butcher, which I think is for the best. I wish that Marvel would just leave it like this and not show us anything else. And I know that there's a lot of casual fans that go to these movies that aren't as in-depth as you or I, Mary, that need the extra trailers to like let them know when it's coming out and why they want to go see the movie. But I feel like the cult following for these movies is so big now that they just don't need to spend the money that they do on marketing. And I don't want to see any more footage. Like every TV spot that comes out about Doctor Strange, I avoid.
Yeah,
I
it was
don't
like you
want any more
can avoid
spoilers.
it. Yeah.
Kinda. Kinda.
Kinda.
Like if you follow any of like the people who break stuff down on like YouTube or TikTok,
Yeah.
you know, it gets thrown in your face over and over again, and you have to like have self-control not to click stuff or to scroll past really fast on TikTok. So like there's an Instagram constantly spoiling things. Ugh, the worst. Go
Yes,
on that explore
you
page.
have to balance your what you care about in terms of spoilers. For me, I don't like spoilers in certain things, but something like Game of Thrones, I really loved spoilers for. Maybe because I don't know, I was a book reader after the show started and I eventually caught up. So I was like, I kind of in the know on some things. And then, of course, there's a point where it passed the books. And I was kind of like, not that I didn't really care, but I was like, I don't know. For some reason, I was really into the spoiler culture for Game of Thrones. But like a lot of other things I don't care for. Marvel, I'm all right with, because I don't know, I go to see them because they're fun. They're fun to talk about, but I don't really care like major spoilers, I guess, like you for other things, like stuff like Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy or whatever. I care about spoilers for that stuff. It just depends for me, but I get it. If you follow a lot of accounts that are big insiders, spoiler stuff, you're gonna be inundated with it. So, and it's
The
tough
way I see
because
it is like Spider-Man No Way Home was phenomenal, right?
Mhm,
And there were moments in that where everybody already knew
mhm.
because there were so many leaks around that movie. And I'm sure Sony had a lot to do with that. What they were doing was also so big, it was probably impossible to keep it secret. But I do wonder, as big as the crowd reactions were for that movie, how much bigger they would have been if nobody actually knew
Yeah.
going in on opening day what was going to happen.
And it's tough. I mean, Marvel spoiler culture, I mean, it's the whole thing. It's the biggest intellectual property right now is
Yeah.
Marvel. It's really tough when you have, a rabid fan base that wants spoilers, want answers, want, leaks and stuff like that. It's hard to be secretive and stuff like that. I mean, the only way, like, I mean, it's so hard to, lock down stuff like that. You can try to be, you can try to throw misdirection in trailers. I mean, we've seen Marvel do that, but fans are able to call it out pretty easily, whether it be, because of weird editing choices, or what. But like, Marvel has tried to misdirect in trailers before. So maybe they'll continue to do that. I mean, fans seem pretty, not eager, but they're, pretty sharp-eyed. They're able to call this stuff out. Like we talked about the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, and that had some clear misdirection in it that we caught basically immediately. So it's tough. I don't know. It I get it completely, and Marvel movies don't need, like, they market themselves. They don't really need anyone to market them, because unless it's a new property in Marvel itself that doesn't have a lot of legs, but stuff like Spider-Man, Thor, they're already well-established characters. You don't need to market them, but they still do. So I get it. But I am very excited for this movie. Like I said, the aesthetic is just incredible.
Taika.
Yeah. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy stuff in there for at least a little bit. Um, so there's a lot of really cool stuff in that trailer. That makes me really excited for this movie, because Thor Ragnarok was such a delight, such a treat, such a real different vibe than anything else in the MCU, outside of maybe, I guess, the Guardians movies that have their own specific vibe. But yeah, it's so good. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to, Natalie Portman is back in the MCU. Very excited for that.
And this time she cares.
Yeah, exactly.
She phoned it in the last movie she was in so hard, and the fact is, I don't blame
I
her
don't
at
blame
all.
her. No, I don't blame her at all. So there's a lot to look forward to. Some really interesting Marvel movies are coming. And I think that's what we really want. I know you had talked about Moonlight on the show because it was
Moon
in the
Knight.
doc.
You
Moon
say
Knight,
Moonlight?
Moon Knight. It's the you know what I mean. I was gonna say they are not the same. One is a movie, one is a TV show. But what did you think about Moon Knight? Is it over yet? Is it fun? Like I said, I have not watched it and I was away for basically a week and a half. So uh
We're halfway through it.
all
Like
right.
whether or not it's going to be great or not is still, we don't know.
Mhm.
It's interesting. I think that the way they've handled DID, I've watched a couple of people who have DID talk about it, and they think they've done like as good of a job as possible within the Marvel universe. So that's good. I've seen a few people say that it's like the best representation in like media so
Mhm.
far. So that's really good. I really love the direction. Like the director Mohammed Diab from Egypt is just the shots that he comes up with. It's shot really beautifully. It's
Mhm.
really well done. I think he's going to be a guy that we hear a lot from over the next few years here, similar to some other names that have come through Marvel and then become household names. So that's something to watch out for. Oscar Isaac is crushing it.
Mhm.
Like just incredible acting from Oscar Isaac. But in terms of story, I think we've got a lot of setup so far. There's a bit of a mystery, but it depends on the execution,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I was gonna say you're still in the middle of it. It's hard to make a judgment
Yeah.
because you don't know how it's gonna land or not land its story beats, and that's
Like
quite important.
as it is right now, I'm excited to watch the next episode tomorrow on Wednesday, but I don't know where it stands in terms of like the other Marvel properties as
Mhm.
of yet. I like parts of it. I think the pacing maybe could be picked up a little bit, but that's been like an issue that all the Marvel series on Disney Plus have dealt with a little bit outside of WandaVision, where I don't know if they've nailed this format yet. They're a
Mhm.
movie company that's dabbling in TV and miniseries, and it's going to take time for them to figure out what works the best. You look back at phase one, even the first half of phase two for Marvel, and outside of Iron Man, there's a lot of issues with how those movies came together, right?
Mhm.
Even I think Captain America: The First Avenger is a really good movie, but like a third of that movie is montages, and it's too many montages.
Too many montages.
Yeah,
Too
so
many.
like
Too many.
they got some things right and some things wrong, and as they got more experience in dealing with that kind of production, they got a lot better. So I'm interested to see where they can go with these Disney Plus series, but I'm not sure outside of WandaVision if the beginning to end has been perfectly paced yet.
Yeah, it's almost tough that they started with WandaVision because it set
Yeah.
the bar so high for
And
them.
they weren't supposed to. Remember, WandaVision was supposed
Yeah.
to be second or third. It was supposed to be Falcon and Winter Soldier that happened
Yeah,
first,
with
but
the pandemic shuffled everything around as it does and
shuffled everything around, and they had to do a massive rewrite for
reshoot.
Falcon and
Yeah.
Winter Soldier because the whole storyline was based around like a weaponized pandemic, essentially. And they're like, "Well, we're not going to do that."
Yeah, nope. I think it was for the better,
It
but
was.
you know. All right, so we're gonna end it there because we could probably talk about a lot of stuff because it's been like a little bit since Andrew and I have had a conversation, but we'll save some of that stuff for Thursday because I'm sure there's more to talk about. But that's all we have for you today on the Cross-Check NHL Show. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure to follow us on your podcast platform of choice, from Apple to Odyssey to Spotify and YouTube, and rate and review us while you're at it. You can follow the pod at Cross-Check NHL on Twitter, me at Mary C. Clarke on Twitter, and Andrew at Andrew Berkshire on Twitter. Thanks for making the Cross-Check NHL Show your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. We'll be back on Friday with some more puck talk, but now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.